Welcome to the What's in Your Strategy podcast. I'm David Rutledge, CEO of Global Strategic Solutions, and we're here today with DistillerSR's CEO, Peter Oblenis. I've known Peter for about 10 years, by the way, and he's a remarkable person and is involved with a lot of innovation along the way. Let me pause just a second and say, welcome, Peter. We'll get to the questions in a few minutes, but let me pause and tell you a little bit about his background. A firm believer that well-written web-based software can solve real-world problems, Peter Oblenis co-founded DistillerSR back in 2008 to do just that. DistillerSR is now the market leader in AI-enabled literature review automation software. In 2001, Peter co-founded TrialStat, where he co-wrote SRS, the first commercially available systematic review software package. He has worked with over 150 research groups around the globe and has published and presented globally on best practices and methodologies for using a web-based software to streamline clinical research. Peter has served in senior management roles with Oracle, WebGain, Mitel, and Flick Software. He holds an MBA from Queen's University and a Bachelor of Computer Science from Carleton University. And he also has completed postgraduate courses in clinical pharmacology, drug development and regulation, and clinical research at Tufts University. Again, Peter, welcome to the show.
Yeah. Thanks, David. It's great to be here with you.
Yeah. Let's go ahead and get started with our questions today. I'm interested in interviewing people like you and understanding the strategy along the way. So let's first start out with some company history. I understand DistillerSR started in 2008, and you and your co-founders were the pioneers, really, in automation for systematic literature reviews, which has grown and grown and grown throughout the years. How did all that start?
Like many of the really interesting innovations that almost started by accident. Back in 2001, I was running co-running an electronic data management company that managed patient information during clinical trials. And we were working, actually our offices were in a hospital research institute on premise. And that group happened to be working with doing systematic reviews on contract for the US government at the same time.
Yeah.
And they were using, Excel, like most people were using back in the day, and some still are. Yeah. And they approached us and said, you guys are propeller heads. Maybe you guys could find a way to help us make this better. And we actually tried to build a little web-based prototype. Maybe you guys could take a look at it and see if we can run with that. And that's how it all got started. I didn't even know what a systematic review was. They showed us what it was. They showed us how much data was involved in the process. The best quote I received as we were looking into it from one of the researchers was, how much data? Well, if the stack of references on my desk were to fall over right now, I'd probably be killed by it. And I thought that was a pretty apt description of the amount of data and information required in the process. So it was a problem that was ripe for automation, and we were fortunate enough to be introduced to it by a team that really knew it very well and taught us a lot about it.
Yeah, and it's only gotten more challenging with all the literature that is blossoming around the world, being published in a lot of variety of formats and stuff. So getting killed back then still could occur today, if you're with that stack of literature that you're looking at. So that's a compelling story. And what I found fascinating with this was how it started with a question in a way that, how can you help make my job easier? And you tackled that, and you were the first to enter this area. Speaking about the first, who was the first person that you talked about with this idea? Because I noticed in your bio that you had some experience previously with TrialStat. They're sort of a clinical data management company, but who was the first person you talked about this idea of yours? And tell me about that and your thoughts around, I wonder if that's meaningful. I wonder if I can have a solution around that. Do you remember that conversation?
Yeah, it was actually a epidemiological researcher named Margaret Sampson who was working at the Hospital Research Institute there. She was working for a very prominent person in the area of systematic reviews named David Muller, and it was their team that was doing these literature reviews. And they had, as I mentioned, had actually tried to prototype a small system that would in some way assist with the process. And so they, again, it was, I'd love to say it was my idea. It was their idea. We just went in with it. And at the outset, this is going to be a really small market. And so it's going to be, maybe a $10-20 million total market for this kind of product. And we learned over time that was wrong. It was a much larger market than that. But again, we were new to systematic reviews, and we were just trying to help. And it was a secondary project for us. It was in addition to the work we were doing in clinical trial data management.
Yeah, there is a quote. I live here in Silicon Valley, for 17 years or whatever. And one of the first books I read when I moved here was this biography about Steve Jobs. And one of the things he says in that book was that he wants to hire people that stay awake. And what he meant by that was that listen, you listen to the customer, listen to your developers or whatever. And so you mentioned a few minutes ago about I wasn't the first one to think about this, but you had a key characteristic, and that was you were listening and you heard. So you listened and you heard and you made action items around that. So, not that you are not taking credit for the wonderful, innovative things you've done for many years, but that key piece of listening, I just wanted to point out to our listeners, is a key characteristic of, I think, successful entrepreneurs. So you have that, you've demonstrated that. So let me get a next question. This is called, what's in your strategy? So let me ask a question about, do you remember when the first time was that you talked about strategy with your team, and how did that go? Because it sounds like you developed a clear vision, and you now need to build a strategy around that and action items from that. Do you remember the first time you had that discussion with your team?
Well, with regards to this software, yeah, we were sitting down, we're talking about it again, sort of trying to figure out, how much to invest in this process. We didn't, again, know what the market was 6 months prior. We didn't know what a systematic literature review was. We certainly didn't understand all the use cases for it. So the first thing we talked about was strategically was, let's keep this small and manageable. And a small operation, because there just isn't much market to support it. But if we keep it tight and keep it highly focused, it can be profitable and so self-sustaining. And that's the key, is really just keep it so that it keeps the lights on. That was our initial discussion. And how hard will it be to build this? And when you look at it, you can get some big wins very quickly. In this space. Obviously, what we have today is a massive piece of software with over 100 person years of software development in it. But even just out of the gate, we were able to get some early wins that demonstrated that this would be a beneficial tool. So yeah, it was about how big is the market? How do we reach this, what we thought was a very small market, and can we address the needs to an extent that would be meaningful to them, to the end users, so that it would be something they'd want to use.
Yeah. So what kind of challenges actually did you face along the way, and that you don't mind sharing with our listeners? What did you learn from that? And I think it's interesting that we talk about challenges, because there's always challenges. So I'll just keep it at that. What challenges did you face early on? And what did you learn? What did you do? And that was sort of pivotal to keep that dream going,
Mm-hmm. Well, I think anytime you are first to market, like we invented the market for literature review software. The biggest challenge is just educating people to the fact that there is a solution because they're not aware that there is, so they're not looking for one.
Yeah.
They're using Excel, and that's as good as it's ever going to get, so they're not out looking to solve the problem because they don't think there's a solution. They're not aware of it. So there's a pretty significant investment required just to get out there and let people know that you exist, and that there is an alternative. Once they see it, I mean, I've often said it, it's like showing somebody who's using an abacus and taking them and showing them Excel. It's like, wow, okay, I get it. This is great. But just getting there in the first place, and especially when you're not from that space, like we were an IT shop. We're not epidemiologists, so we're outsiders coming in and telling them how to do their job better. And so there's, you have to work to gain that acceptance. You have to earn it. We did a lot of speaking gigs at conferences and symposia and so on, and actually participated. I co-authored a couple of actual lit reviews, systematic reviews that were peer reviewed, just to get the credibility required to get that audience. So that was a big challenge. Still a significant challenge as we move into new markets.
Yeah. For me personally, I had a member of my staff that was assigned to conduct these systematic reviews, and we had done those like we had done for many years, using Excel to capture the data and generate reports from that. And she and I were at one of the meetings that you were talking at, and got her attention a lot quicker than it got my attention, because she was the one actually in the trenches doing the work. Mm-hmm. And she and I together met with you and your staff and had initial conversations. But the piece that I thought was really important, had I been the only person in that audience, not the one doing the hands-on activity, had I done this in the past, yeah. But things that I worked with back then were relatively small in scope. I made the decision to, which articles I'm going to use and which are not. I didn't have any pre-specified kind of things. And back then it was fine, but regulators, as an example, were getting more critical of how our process went. And someone on staff that was doing this saw the value faster than I did, but I was a quick adopter, and we engaged in conversations with that. Something fun I want to ask you is, can you name a book that influenced you and why? There are several books behind me, including several about systematic literature reviews with Cochrane, and you see you notice it right there, I guess. Yeah, and it's an important piece of it's a skill that's important. You don't have to say Cochrane, but I'm just saying that books really do influence me and those of our listeners. So, what's the book that you could recommend?
I'm going to go back to a really, really old one. It's like at least 20 years old. Jeffrey Moore's Crossing the Chasm, which is kind of a Bible in the technology space. It just describes the journey from basically invention to getting early adopters on board to make to the majority market, and that's it's just it's highly dated. Its references are very dated right now, but the model is bang on. Yeah,
that's good. I'll take a look at that. Thanks for that. I'm going to ask you a provocative question about what was your biggest failure, and what would you tell people who are afraid of failing, especially trying to become an entrepreneur and implement their dream?
Well, I would say in business, my biggest failure was the company that came before DistillerSR, which was at TrialStat. Again, we were basically building one of the first software as a service platforms for managing patient data for patients involved in clinical trials. That is a go big or go home proposition. You can't do that with a small team. You need a large team. So we were venture capital funded. We had a significant amount of money in, and things were going quite well until 2007 hit, and we had a global economic meltdown, and all sources of funding just disappeared. And so we ended up selling that company off at a very significant discount. We had no choice. We just couldn't fund it anymore, and we could not raise additional capital. Our funders were tapped out. They weren't willing to come to the table during that crisis situation, and so it was a pretty sobering moment to see that whole thing come sort of crashing down. I think the takeaway from it is that at that exact moment, it does seem like the world's over. This is something you worked on for 6 or 7 years, and it just blew up. But what you learn, and this is a story I hear from most people who've been through something similar, or even things like marriage breakups, these things, is that you're much more resilient than you think you are. And things will turn around for you, and you will get additional kicks at the can. And that's a really important life lesson, I think, is that it's just when you think it's not going to get any better, it can't get, and it does.
Yeah, and I just want to pause and just honor that, because the number one reason that, it depends on which list you look at, but in general, the number one reason that startups, innovative businesses go under is that funding aspect, getting the continued funding to go forward and get it. So on one hand, most people listening to the podcast are going to really appreciate that, because if you've tried to do things on your own and get funding and do things, that. And it's nice to hear from a successful innovator that was part of his history too. So I just wanted to pause and honor that, because it's not unique. It's really the more normal than not. The way you respond to it is going to make the difference, right? Yeah. So speaking of the way you respond and how you can be productive, I have a question here about, what's the best time of day for Peter in terms of the most productive pieces of the day for you? And I'll leave the question open and kind of let you respond to that.
Well, my undergrad's in software. Probably not alone I'm a night owl.
Okay. Yeah.
More productive in the evenings and at night when there are fewer distractions around. Just get into a zone, into a groove.
Yeah. With that question, when did you first become know yourself and said, this is, if I need to be productive, this is when I don't want to pass up, this late afternoon, this evening, because I know for me, this is going to be important for me. When did you first come to that self-realization that was your time? Yeah.
Probably undergrad, towards the end of undergrad. You pulling all-nighters and then realizing that that's actually when I'm getting most of the work. And so, and then I had another, shortly after graduation, I had another software company that we started up, and that was basically an all-night kind of gig as well.
Yeah. I've done all-nighters too, both, as a student, as a professor, chairman, met a director at a large pharmaceutical company and director at a large medical device company along the way, and as a consultant now. And one of the things I learned along the way was, not only did I pull the all-nighter, but I was actually enjoying what I was doing, right? So, there has to be that underlying passion that you bring to that all-nighter also. It could be out of fear to get the grade, but there's also, once you get past the grades, there's also that passion, so that's.
I wouldn't pull an all-nighter just doing my taxes. That would
yeah, that's good. All right, so Peter, if you weren't an entrepreneur, what would you be?
Well, I do like, I'm always trying to do something. I'm interested in doing something that I think is at least as meaningful. One thing prior to the Tralstat days even, I'd done an MBA. I was interested in leadership roles. I'm interested in the leverage you can get from a really good team. So if you have one idea and one person, you can do so much. But if you have ideas and you've got a team that's really solid, you can do so much. And so I would definitely have gravitated towards leadership roles within other organizations that got me excited.
Yeah. I'm going to go off script just a little bit because we've got some fun questions to ask Peter. We'll get to that toward the end of the podcast, but I don't want the listeners to not listen to this without getting to what I think is so incredible that you've done regarding the survey, this market survey that you did in late 2022. Walk us through the strategy behind thinking about doing that survey, and then walk us through some of the top level results you found from that. Yeah.
Sure. I mean, we're in this literature review automation space, and we have many organizations that adopt it and get it right away, and there's some that are take a little longer to come around. So we were basically surveying groups that were out there that were doing literature reviews to sort of identify what motivates people to adopt an automation approach or not for lit review solutions, and also understanding sort of the organizational preparedness and the management maturity required to make that adoption. Certainly, it varies across size of organization and the mandate of that organization. So that's what we were looking to gather. We talked to 146 different people and got some very interesting information back from that. Mostly, we asked about things like confidence, like how confident are you in your process and your ability to meet the regulatory requirements that are out there. And I guess not surprisingly, we found that a majority of people who have a more automated process, a more formal process in place, are much more confident than those who are not in their ability to meet their regulatory requirements, not have findings, that sort of thing in the process. And we also found that in terms of setbacks and so on, organizations who've adopted lit review software are better equipped to meet the standards and avoid things that are going to get you pushed back in your regulatory steps. I guess other interesting things, 75% of respondents who've adopted lit review software trust their data. It's interesting when you ask people if they trust their own data, and if they're not using a platform, most of them don't.
Yeah.
37% of respondents who are doing manual processes are confident that their submissions are not going to get sent back. 37%. That's pretty bad. So, and they know why too, right? They know they've got data consistency problems, data provenance problems, all kinds of errors creeping into the process that they can't track. They don't have audit trails. They know they're going to flunk on process, if not on data. And then of course that rejected submissions result in cost, like product not getting to market, patients not getting access to them, time on patent is lost, that type of thing. So again, I guess not super surprising the results, but that last one, that 37% are confident in their processes and their data, that really struck home. The next question is, why aren't you doing something about it, right?
Yeah, and we'll get to that. I mean, did you want to elaborate on that now? Why aren't you doing?
No. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say that I know that when we did these systematic literature reviews previously, and as we're doing it as a consulting group, the message I give to people is you need to paint this picture of what you're doing, so that if someone walked outside and on the sidewalk found this paper that said, "How are you doing this?" Can they repeat it? And to that detail, because that's what regulators will do. Also, they want you to earn your credibility in doing systematic literature reviews. It's tough stuff, and it's not easy. And there are a lot of factors that can distract you from doing work that can be of high quality, much less interpreting what you're doing and putting it in the right context. That's a gray matter activity that's out there also, but just the process of tracking things. And I know for me that Prisma document was difficult for us to generate until we used an innovative solution, and that made our life a lot easier in terms of accuracy and flowing. If someone found that document or that table, figure, diagram on the sidewalk outside, it could easily show what happened to all the data that you got and how did you get to the core data at the bottom.
That's a great example. I mean, we've had top tier med dev shops tell us it can take them 2 or 3 days to make a Prisma document, 2 or 3 person days.
I totally understand it. Yeah, I totally get it.
And that's not using gray matter very efficiently, right? I mean, that's just counting stuff, right? And adding stuff up and sorting stuff. And that's what computers are good at. You're experts on things that require expertise.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you, what would you say to those organizations that are still using manual processes in terms of data quality and issues that we've alluded to along the way? So you've got years and years now of experience. You're the market leader. You got good name recognition for you and the company, but you still come across people that are still using the manual process. There's still an ability to grow your market. So what's your message today in terms of why are you still using this manual process?
Yeah, I mean, one of the easy ones is look at your peers. They're not doing it manually anymore, and there's a reason why. You're kind of a laggard in the space if you're not at least considering some sort of automation piece. But there's all kinds of other things that you're missing out on if you're not using a platform to do it. One is obviously there's just the time savings and the error rates that are going to go down, all that stuff. But there's things like, if you tried to hire somebody to help you with your lit reviews lately, you're going to find there aren't that many people out there on the market. It's there's not a lot of talent out there. So how do you bring in more junior people in a way that's not going to be dangerous? So by using a platform that has a prescribed process in it that enforces that prescribed process, you can use people with a lot less experience in your process. You monitor what they're doing. You can compare their results to expert results. You can leverage that. Just the audit trail at the let's say you are asked a question during audit by a notified body. We've had the notified bodies say that when the companies they're auditing are using a platform, the process goes a lot faster because they can dive right into the data and see it, right? And it's not a matter of it's over here and it's sort of shuffling papers around and trying to find things, and they believe the story because it's an unassailable audit trail. It's baked into the machine. You can't fudge it. So just things like that. And I think if you're just looking at it, you can look at it from the bottom line, which is I'm saving time, I'm saving money. I don't need I can do more work with the same amount of people. This obvious things. And then you could look at it from the other side, which is top line, which is reduced time to market and more time on patent and that type of thing, which is it depends who you're pitching it to, but if you're pitching it to your CEO, I think the second set of arguments are more compelling than the first. They're interested in maximizing their ROI. This is just a process you have to do. What's really interesting, getting these products, these amazing innovative medical devices into the market. That's what our focus should be. And if we can make the other part simpler and faster, then that's something that's worth looking at.
One thing that we did along the way was I hired people kind of all around the world, and we were able to build a system that we could have our systematic literature reviews done, 24 hours a day.
Yes.
As we shifted people to access the platform as the sun was coming up in their geography. So by the time it got back to us in our morning, we had a significant amount of work that had continued to be done. I could check it along the way to see how things are going and
Mhm.
how it's moving through the system and how close we are to getting the final article graded and summarized and things like that. So that was a really big benefit. It'd been difficult to do that with an Excel spreadsheet, where you had to wait to the person to kind of get out of the spreadsheet to be able to manipulate it again if you had it on a server, a SharePoint drive or something along the way. But your platform allowed more than one person to access it to be able to uh, key in on their review, along the way, and you could have people working. You could have activity going on 24 hours a day, and
Yeah.
that was a significant time shrink for us. Yeah. So.
If I could throw in one other interesting finding, I thought, and it was around data reuse. So a lot of folks that when we first talked to them, and they're using their Excel platforms and everything, a lot of the metadata that's captured from references from full text documents and so on just goes into that spreadsheet there, and it doesn't get reused. It's a very expensive process.
Yeah. That's good. That's a good point.
You've got experts reading papers and extracting very valuable metadata that isn't being used again and again. And we found 38% of folks who are not using a platform are reusing their data in one way, shape, or another. Whereas it's more than half if they are using a platform. And that reuse has all kinds of interesting benefits to it. One, obviously, you don't extract the same data twice. That's the obvious one. The second one is if you're doing devices that are very similar in nature, those reviews will have some Venn diagram of the papers you're looking at is going to have some overlap. It would be great if this other group that's looking at a different device pulls up a reference and goes, hey, wow, we've already filled out all that stuff. Boom, it's done. But we already have the PDF for that. Don't buy another copy of that PDF.
That's right.
All those things that are beneficial from actually the other one I heard recently was when two groups are working in parallel using the same references but for different reviews, sometimes they extract the data slightly differently and they get
depending on the scope of what they're working on.
Right. Or the one group has an error, the other one doesn't, and that's a glaring problem with data consistency. That doesn't happen if you're sharing the same data set. So.
Yeah, that's a good point. The other thing that's maybe not so novel anymore, but at the time was, you have lots of different places you can go to get an article, kind of thing. But then you store a little different places and stuff. One of the things I learned along the way was you have an automatic ability to get all the free articles that are out there, open source, and then you can choose to go to a provider of articles, and with, I guess, a contractual relationship, was able to get these articles, and I thought would be a significant savings. So, and now you have it in your database. So I wanted to touch on that it's not novel in the sense of getting articles different ways, but it's novel in the sense of having really one source to go to and keep better track of it.
Yeah. No, for sure. And then people are saying, "Oh, wow, big deal. You're buying the same PDF twice." So that can be like an $800 PDF, right?
Yeah. No, as a consultant, I'm aware of those charges a lot more today than I was in the past. Let's get back to some. You want to have anything else to say about the survey, because it's a significant amount of effort. You've skimmed the top with a high level, good talking points along the way, and look forward to hearing more of the details also presented at various meetings that are coming up this year in 2023. Anything else before we leave the survey? Because this is a significant contribution of new information in this area.
Well, I thought one of the other things that's interesting, because it was when we first got into the market back in the day, it's not something we even anticipated, but we found that 64% of the groups we spoke with were using the platform similar to or identical to the one they're using for lit reviews, but they're for post-market surveillance. And because the two processes are very similar in nature, often those two groups don't even talk to each other, right?
Different responsibilities within the organization. Yeah.
But if you, like these groups have done, they're leveraging the same technology stack to solve multiple problems. There's cost savings, there's data sharing implications that are positive.
Yeah, that's very good.
So on. So I thought that was an interesting finding as well.
That is, yeah. Thank you for that. That's cool. Let me go back to a couple of fun questions real quickly, and then we'll end with some provocative questions about where AI is taking us today. So let's go back to if you had to choose one meal to eat for the rest of your days, what would it be? Before you answer this, we're going to get some insights into your soul with that question. So be careful.
Well, okay, if we can make the assumption that eating it every day wouldn't kill me, I'm going to go with like a red Thai curry dish. With the basil on rice. I could probably eat that every day.
And you could change the proportions of the sauce and the rice and etc. on there to match up with early morning or late at night or during all-nighters. That's good. That's good.
Yeah.
How about what are 3 books you would recommend to our audience and why? And we talked about one that was meaningful to you. So what about 3 books? And I'm going to ask you also about 3 movies you'd say would be cool for the audience to watch also. Let's start with the books.
Books. I like nonfiction. One of the ones, and people are very familiar with the Elizabeth Holmes story, but Bad Blood, I found to be just a very intriguing book on how off the rails things can go. You've got somebody that's clearly not either not interested in telling the truth or incapable of it. I'm not sure what it is, but I found that to be a great book.
By the way, I've ride my bike in Palo Alto from Mountain View, and I've gone by Theranos many times, and there was really a story that really hit home with me, because I think it's about 3.5 miles from my house, basically. And as I saw it, the root problem with her getting down the line was she never did that study you need to do for proof of concept, right? Yeah. She tried and failed many times, but she started making decisions for market penetration and applications before the concept was actually proven.
That's crossing the chasm thing, right? She cracked across it before she got the. You're right.
That's good. Yeah.
And I think you alluded to another one earlier that I really like, which is Walter Isaacson's book about Steve Jobs, right? That's a fantastic book.
Yeah. When I moved out here, like I told you, it was one of the books I read, and I fell in love with Steve Jobs, as I started reading it, and then I saw the dark side of Steve Jobs, and I fell out of love with Steve Jobs, and it was hard to keep pushing to read because he had done some pretty nasty, treated people nasty, basically. Yeah. And then he went through, he got through and I finished the book and fell back in love with Steve Jobs. But it was a journey for me emotionally to stay looking at him as an icon and someone I admired, because it hurts me when I see people hurt people, either with words, words and that kind of thing. And so those of you that get the book, if you were like me, push through, because it's a wonderful story, and he remains one of my people that I look at as an innovator and an inspirational person. Yeah, that's great. So you're 2 for 2 with me on those stuff.
I mean, my takeaway from that is that sometimes I think, some people who can do great things aren't necessarily great people, but I think you got to be somewhere on the spectrum to be that, to be, lead such an amazing, like the guy transformed the planet, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
It's similar to Elon Musk, right? Again, you may not like him, but holy cow, like the guy's a force of nature, right? So last one is just another business book called The Hard Thing About Hard Things, which is guy Ben Horowitz wrote it. I just like it because it is a very unvarnished discussion about what it takes to take a business from inception through to scale it up to be a successful business. And it's very it's almost callous in its description of, here's what you got to do, and you're not going to like some of it. Now that said, I don't think there's ever excuses for being nasty to people, but you do have to make some tough decisions and move things along. So I found that to be a book just because it resonated with my reality.
Yeah. Okay. What about Netflix or HBO Max or whatever?
I only got
3 movies.
The two. The fun one is The Big Short. I really like that movie. I love the book. I love all of his books, actually. I just love the writing style, and the fact that it's based in reality is interesting, and how such a small group of people really caught onto and bet on what was really happening is surprising and scary, actually. The other one is the Netflix show The Bleeding Edge, which is a kind of required viewing for
for anybody in medical devices. I required that of my staff when I was with a large medical device company, and then along the way, as when I became a consultant, I mentioned it to people that I would run into and doing business with if they've seen that. Surprised that there are people out there that haven't seen it, and I think it's really influential for you to watch it, because it can change your heart in terms of wanting to do the very best for people who are using the product. The Bleeding Edge. That's great. So
those are the only 2 I picked. I didn't have a third. The other ones are just fun.
Okay. Those are 2 good ones, but those are 2 good ones. So all right, let's switch gears and get to what apparently is an area that people are becoming more afraid of. So let me put it into context a little bit. When I left a large medical device manufacturer, the first thing I did, like the following week after I left, was I got connected with an AI group of engineers, and that was a piece of our business. 5 years ago, I'm ending my 4th year as a consultant right now, but where we were seeing AI being used in our medical devices. And I didn't have a lot of good background with that. And I ended up wanted to learn more. And I found out that there was the same experience I had when I first got into pharmacokinetics and pharmacodynamics. There's terminologies that are used in that sector of science. And the same thing with artificial intelligence and machine learning, et cetera. There's terminology you got to understand along the way. And I attended a workshop, and usually when I attend workshops, I'm pretty knowledgeable about what we're going to be doing. It's not like I'm starting from zero. This was one where I started from zero, and I ended up I was like the dummy in the class, because I couldn't even give a definition of artificial intelligence in my mind, as I was like, what exactly is this? But I know it was important to our sector. So turn around. I went through a week-long workshop with some of my best new friends who were computer programmers. And about the only thing I knew in computer programming was Control C and Control V. That's about the extent of my programming. And it was really, really a fun kind of immerse in personal growth and also professional growth experience. And I wrote a couple of articles on that in LinkedIn a few years ago. And it's a passion of mine even today, in the sense of trying to follow the technology. But so, do you think people are more afraid or less afraid of AI than they were 5 years ago?
Well, it depends on how you think of afraid. So, I first presented in our market. I first presented on the use of AI in systematic reviews at a Cochrane symposium in 2006.
Wow.
The models that we're using today are pretty much the same. They haven't really changed. The algorithms are
The
pretty much,
algorithms, yeah,
they
yeah,
really adapted that much. But back in the day, people are like, well, I can't use AI. I can't trust AI. It doesn't explain how it did things. It's a black box, and I'm going to have to find have to reread it anyways to prove that it was right. That has changed. The one thing I will say that's positive about ChatGPT, I mean, there are many interesting things about ChatGPT, but one of the positive things is it's opened people's eyes up to at least exploring the use of AI where it makes sense, where you can do so safely and pragmatically. And there are use cases for AI, certainly in lit reviews, but all over the place. And people are more open to it now than they were, say, even 5 years ago, for sure.
yeah, yeah. There's a lot people, and I'm seeing that too. That we're having, there's a way to model AI in the things that you're doing, I think one or both of those articles I wrote on LinkedIn I use, and this I didn't come up with this myself, but I learned it along the way that AI plus people, is better than AI or people.
Mm-hmm.
That you need to have that combination of a person overseeing that activity. And then when you start talking about AI and machine learning, those situations are when you add people to that beats AI and machine learning or people trying to do the same thing along the way too. So I come down on the just don't give it full blown the rein. Don't just let go of the reins and let it go. Oversee what you're doing and try to understand it along the way, and so you can see how it's shifting along the way from what it's learning from previous data sets and what's happening with new data sets coming in. I've made personally investments in software, and I won't call them software, but algorithms to help my job to be better,
Mm-hmm.
as a consultant along the way. And I'm a big fan of this technology. So I think maybe some of the scared pieces about this come from people who just haven't taken the time to learn about AI and what it means.
Yeah,
and they bring some assumptions that are really not really right. Yeah.
Well, yeah, and I think your human in the loop approach, right, is again, that's a pragmatic use of it. It's not like we do talk to people going, oh, can I come up, push the big lit button and it's going to do my lit review for me?
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
no, we're not even close to that.
Yeah.
But can I use it how about if I just use it to see if my humans made mistakes? That's a completely safe way to use AI. And if it's wrong, then you say, oh, no, you're wrong. But if it's right, it just found an error for you. Yeah. And so like that's a really easy one. Or we use it, again, we try to deploy it in ways that is, you don't actually need a data scientist on board. You don't need to actually really understand much about AI other than that it's doing something. And there's all kinds. I mean, half the stuff we use today, use Siri, you're using some AI, right? And
exactly. Yeah.
Right? No, it's not. But the most interesting experiment we did with ChatGPT was I had it summarize my employees' LinkedIn profiles, and without any exception, it got everything 100% wrong. It was very interesting because it's not a knowledge model, right?
Did you copy and paste their profile and then put that into the ChatGPT to say, summarize this for me?
Yeah.
I mean, is that how you did that? Okay.
Did a very bad job.
Yeah. So you want to talk about ChatGPT because I'm a big fan.
If we don't talk about it, we'll be the only people who aren't talking.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Right. So I've been using. I bought a subscription to ChatGPT to use the most current version. I think I'm on version 4. Of this subscription model, and I have almost a year where I say I have used it daily. You know what I'm saying? So I use it for many things and applications, and even when like I'll put something in there and say, here was chapter 1 of this. Can you summarize this for me? And it had a word length on it, but if it was within that word length, it would summarize it for me. And there again, I had knowledge of that chapter, so I was able to read it and use the output. And usually, I don't use it 100%. I edit it myself based upon my content knowledge and field knowledge and broader understanding the field to put that into perspective, kind of stuff. But I'm a big fan of Chat GPT, and you could ask the question a lot about, well, can I just ask it to write a clinical evaluation or do a systematic literature review for this particular product and give it to me by 5 this afternoon? We're not, and you said we're not there yet, and there's a whole lot of reasons behind that. But we can still use that in our systematic literature reviews also along the way. And I call it in a sliver of the process to help us, do a better job along the way. And I'm a big fan of it. And but you can't use it again without the human perspective on it. And don't go off into an unknown area and do things, because you won't know how to use your critical thinking ability and your broader knowledge and your empathy to what's and your ranking of things along the way either. Yeah, but I'm sort of a fan of that, and it sounds like you are too, right?
Yeah, I like it to just, so like you say, I basically describe it as making a rough draft of something for me, and you go through and add your own content to it. And some of the things I think that you've noticed about it too. I mean, it's out of date, right? So if you're referring to something that just happened, it doesn't know about it yet, right? It's not in the model.
Yeah.
So you got to be able to apply that kind of contextual knowledge as well.
Yeah, and then if you have algorithms and programs that stay current, that'll trump Chat GPT in the sense of getting something beyond September 2021, or whatever, to get the current information. So there is that realistic limitation. Yeah.
Listening to a very interesting program yesterday, and they're talking about, and this is a well-known issue, but that AI learns what it's been trained on. So it's also got unbelievable amounts of cultural bias in it, right? And can behave in a misogynistic manner, even things like that.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and I was giving an example of RCTs. RCT is a high level, level of research, but not all RCTs are built the same. And so, and even changing the definition of an outcome parameter, you see swaying throughout the literature of people using the definition a little bit differently because of what they're doing. And yet, an algorithm doesn't pick up on those subtleties, can't put it into the context of the therapeutic area along the way. So it's a lot of fun things that it does, but there's some, limitations there too. And certainly you need that
I think
critical thinking. Yeah.
When you're talking to people who don't really understand how it works, I think when you describe it for what it truly is, which is it's a statistical model, right? It's math, and of course we put in heuristics and other things to help sort of round out the corners a little bit and smooth everything out. But fundamentally, it's still just a probability model, and it doesn't have that, like you said, it doesn't have the underlying ability to make the analytical decisions that humans have. Yeah,
the reasoning, putting it into context, picking up what's really important to patients versus what's the data say, that kind of thing. So it can get there, but I think moving along in that way where we can connect an innovative algorithm to a human along the way is the way to go. Yep. So any final thoughts? I was going to bring this to a close, and it's been wonderful talking with you. Any final thoughts that you may have along the way? You're doing great work. You've incorporated AI enhanced abilities within Distiller, and you're keeping up with the trends by doing the survey, finding out where the market is, what you can do to help make their lives easier along the way. You're the market leader, so you're a very special person driving innovation. You have a wonderful team behind you that have that same passion, and you've built a great product that's continuing to change as the market changes. So that's great. Yeah.
Well, I really appreciate that. It's I'm very, very fortunate to be doing something I love. So
Yeah, right.
I count myself lucky.
Well, thank you, Peter, for spending some time with us, and I hope your listeners are going to appreciate your journey and how the journey really doesn't stop. It's still a journey, right? You're going to wake up tomorrow, you're going to go work next week with you and your team, and you're still out there pushing the boundaries of systematic literature reviews along the way. So congratulations on your success so far, and I look forward to learning more about what DistillerSR is doing under your leadership.
Thank you. Thank you. It's been a great discussion. I've really enjoyed speaking with you, David.
Yeah, you bet. Okay.
Cheers.